This week I have been decluttering. This is my bedroom tidy. It didn't look like this at the start of the week. It was a mess and I couldn't breathe. If it looks this full tidy, can you imagine what it looked like after a week with teenage sleepovers and no time to pick things up? I couldn't breathe. I was drowning in stuff. So in this room this week, I spent time doing the biggest declutter I've ever done. I got rid of carfuls of stuff, pieces of furniture, and also a feeling of overwhelm. As the space crept in, so did the calm. After a year of slow living freedom and decluttering, I'm amazed that I had let myself fall back into old habits of self-sabotaging by bringing in so much stuff. Sometimes I can't say no to myself. I can set boundaries with the world, but boundaries with my own self is harder. Decks, books, toys, dolls, thrifted finds, and food. It's a yes to all of it sometimes, and it makes me sink. My art studio, you can see, is rammed, and yet still this week I bought in a brand new table. Okay, only £5 and painted in fairies, but as you can see, I already have so much stuff in here. I really didn't need more furniture. So, in amongst all the stuff, one morning this week I sat down to draw some Sheila gigs. And I have to say, I felt really sad and frustrated at myself for no movement forward because of my inability to say no to myself sometimes. And I put my feet in water and I began to draw plants, and it suddenly looked familiar. What was I drawing? And I realised I was in a garden, just not my own yet. I was in the Chalicewell Gardens in Glastonbury, and my feet were in the water of the Chalicewell Spring. Why was I suddenly in Glastonbury? Was I turning the Sheila into Mother Mary? I remembered that day walking the waters when Mother Mary energy came up through the ground at me, reducing me to tears right there in front of everybody in the garden. It had felt like a comforting mother's hug, willing me forward. The power of sacred water and ley lines under my feet, I added them all here in my art. I began to add in the rusty nails. These nails collected from the pallets I took apart to build the garden fences. And I looked again at this shape that recurs in the Sheila images and realised it was the Sacred Heart, again another reference back to Mother Mary energy. Something strange was going on here. Gardens in my mind, feet in water, Mother Mary, and a healing journey. I know that when Mother Mary energy turns up, healing is beckoning. The healing of learning to say no to myself, to put off immediate pleasure for long-term gain. This is the area I'm struggling with the most. And I looked again at the artwork that I'd made that morning and realised, feet in water, this was the Temperance card. Was Temperance beckoning me out into the garden for garden Arcana? The 3 cards this week, Death, the Devil and Temperance. It would seem that Temperance was beckoning me into the garden. I step out into the garden and immediately come face to face with the Temperance energy, standing in an old paddling pool where water once stood. So here, planted in this old paddling pool which was cracked, and I saved it at the tip. Somebody was about to throw it in at the tip and I grabbed it. Brilliant for the temperance card, because it should be filled with water. It makes me think of the temperance card through and through, but you can see it's pretty round. This is the one that I'm looking at now. This belongs to the mint family, and I'm pretty certain it's self-heal. Sometimes my plant identifier says it's self-heal, or last year it was self-heal. That's what I assumed I was growing. This year it's saying it's peppermint, but I think it's self-heal, and the meaning behind this is basically what it says on the tin. It's got the energy to look within yourself and to find your own power and to find your own solutions and to self-heal. It's really good for overcoming emotional wounds and rebalancing, so it's absolutely perfect for temperance energy. Also in here, look, we've got, this is called poached eggplant. Isn't it gorgeous? We have these amazing clematis. Now I planted this last year and it was tiny, so this is the very first time it's ever flowered. Look at that, isn't that incredible? Another great plant for temperance is this iris. I've actually filmed this at the top of the garden for this video. It's called pale yellow flower something. Oh, I couldn't remember then and I can't remember now. I'll put it on the screen. Fantastic for temperance. And then we have this herb. This herb is lovage, and I planted a tiny pot of this a couple of years ago and then moved it last year over to here, but I think this year it's about to flower. Look, it's got these tufts on, which is amazing. Lovage is really good for love and sexual energy as well. I've got the lettuce growing. It's a really nice place to start with one foot in the water in the paddling pool. Look, the feverfew is all about to open as well, which is wonderful. So self-love. The plan is in the next week, when the flowers come out, or the next couple of weeks, to make a flower essence with this and another flower which I'm going to show you now. But self-love, and it's not just here, it's all over the garden. So self-heal, standing in water, a call to heal myself with flowers perhaps. Here is some more self-heal in Tinny's garden. It's spreading around the garden now and I love it. Its energy seems perfect for what I need at the moment, for learning how to set those boundaries and to moderate myself. I think I'm being called to make some flower essences to actually add the flowers to water. Everything is standing in water here, including the temperance card. Temperance, which is the card for Sagittarius, and I am a Sagittarius. We love extremes. We don't do so well with middle paths. Just as my lurchers, my two fools in the garden, don't do so well with hearing no when it comes to digging holes on repeat. Look what they were doing as I was contemplating making flower essences. I'm telling them off here. They're trying to gauge whether I mean it or not, whether they can creep back up, whether they're forgiven yet. Permanent holes in the garden, right next to a patch of buttercups I wanted to show you, which are now covered in mud. But I have more buttercups up here in the sunny, bright vegetable garden. It's so hot today. And I want to show you the buttercups because they too are fantastic for confidence giving. Here they are growing next to some more self-heal. I am definitely going to make a flower essence with these two plants to find the confidence, to find some balance in my life, to find the middle path, to not be so extreme, to stop being all or nothing. Self-heal and buttercups all being called to place them in water for some natural remedies to support my healing, to tap into earth energies, to tap into Mother Mary energy, to reparent myself, to teach myself about boundaries, to become more moderate, less extreme. The alchemy of the middle path. The iris often growing near water. This has to be temperance energy too. I was thinking about the temperance card this week. There is actually a middle path here, and that's what temperance is all about. It's about balance and bringing extremes together and the alchemy of mixing them into something that's a bit more moderate, a middle path as it were. So I think let's clear the middle path today. At the minute this looks like the path, but that's actually garden. And I said in the last garden arcana video that this area here is actually a triple goddess sign, and it is. Can you see there is a moon shape there, and then the circle there, and then there's another moon shape there, and then these garden beds are actually sun's rays coming up. Well, that was the aim of it anyway. And there is actually more under there, but of course the hedge is kind of all taken over. So let's clear the middle path and let's see if for Temperance Week we can get a middle path going. And before I do that, I just have to show you again these fox and cub flowers. Look at them, aren't they absolutely gorgeous? All in flower, and you can see there's loads more coming around the base, and they're all in the edges here. It's just absolutely amazing the way that they've spread. So I get to work on actually physically creating a real middle path. A real middle path in place of weeds. And my neighbourhood robin that lives in my garden came down to keep me company, as did bees and frogs and all sorts today. It was quite a job clearing it out, but eventually there it is, a middle path emerging. The robin came down to see what was going on, and as I trialled it out, I was transported yet again back to the Chalice Well Gardens. Mother Mary energy oozing up through the ground at me, telling me that I've got this. Feet in water, literally living and walking the temperance energy in my garden this week. It was quite extraordinary, as if a portal to the divine had opened up, channeled via my art perhaps this morning, and carried out with me into the garden. When I came back into my studio later that day, I understood clearly what these art pieces had been about. It had taken a while for the penny to drop, but finally it had. And I think that's such a magical understanding to have about temperance in the garden. We're met with all this majesty and light and creation and wonder, and yet on the surface it's holes dug in lawns and forgotten dog toys and the next job. There are so many mundane steps and tasks to keep any aspect of our life ticking, including a garden. And yet within that, within the mundane steps and the playing with the dogs, within all of that, within the holes in the lawn, there is something deeper, a spring beneath the ground of pure magic, of connection to the divine, of earth magic. What looks like simply watering plants or doing garden tasks is actually connecting you to something so much bigger. Perhaps our gardens are the mixing of the mundane with divine portals, the mixing together. The garden is the result. Perhaps the whole of the garden is temperance itself, the alchemy of the divine with the mundane. It's so magical. Truly distracted by temperance, but also we're looking for the devil. I have to choose my one and only foxglove that's appeared this year. Where have they all gone? This called Devil's Thimble. Don't pick foxgloves and take them into your home, because the superstition is they allow the devil to enter. And then we go to this corner with all the flags. The flag of the death card, perhaps. This area is inspired by Frida Kahlo. You can see some of my recycled and upcycled palettes here are decorated with Frida's face and Mexican patterns. The aim was to have a kind of Day of the Dead celebration and a celebration of Frida's life and creativity. But that Day of the Dead imagery really captured me. So, Day of the Dead and butterflies for transformation and rebirth and starting again. All really good depictions for the death card, I think. Of course, all of this area is still a work in progress because it no longer houses the hot tub. It does have beautiful new clematis growing on it, however, and I have plans for possible outdoor theatres and reading nooks here to come watch this space. Of course, this Day of the Dead area is also right next to my ancestor altar, placed here on purpose because of the Day of the Dead connections. This underneath the climbing rose, which has stepped into new life. Look, finally, this week, the climbing rose has started to open, and this is one of my most longed for moments in the garden every year. So I'm going outside to do some work today, but look, the roses, they're finally open. Oh, that is just so exciting to see. Look, all the climbing roses are opening, which is wonderful. I also wanted to show you the pots around the conservatory, all in flower now and looking so beautiful. I stopped and googled the meaning of these pink carnations, and don't you know it, their meaning is the Virgin Mary. That's what they symbolise. My heart skipped a beat when I realised Mother Mary next to the night sky petunias. What an amazing coincidence. All looked over by my Morrigan crow in the garden. The garden crow, a homage to the Morrigan and perfect for the death card. Mother Mary and the Morrigan next to each other. There are extremes waiting for the alchemy of temperance. I also decided to take these major arcana energies out into the real world, into my woods that I walked with the dogs. Would I find those energies of the death card, temperance and the devil in the woods? The woods are feeling so magical at the moment. Summertime sees the foliage grow and tree cover become really dense, and it just feels so secretive and magical at this time of year. I was absolutely certain that on this walk I would find them, and sure enough, here was Temperance, a middle path through a trunk of a tree, a new altar perhaps, standing in its own pool of mossy water. There's my full energy charging past. Excited. And then I spotted all of these vines that twist and grow around the tree trunks. The devil energy, the wrapping and the controlling and the chains of the devil inviting me through this arch. No, thank you. And then dodging dog zoomies. Gee whiz, Roo. It didn't take long to stumble across the death card. Here, lots of dead bluebells, or bluebells on their lower turn of the wheel, I should say. This just 2 weeks previously had been just lush green and blue. How different it looks once the wheel begins to turn. And then on the top path of the woods, the devil, somebody's rubbish from a fish and chip supper. They'd even had the nerve to throw down the bag that they could have collected their own rubbish up in. So I collected it up and walked past these beautiful field roses to the bin. Field roses next to a litter bin. The extremes of temperance right there. So in a very pared back bedroom, which feels like coming up for air, I wanted to show you some of the decks I've been working with, looking around these 3 major Arcana cards. Now, of course, with these pieces of art that I did, which you saw in the video, that link to feet in water and that experience in Glastonbury, and bringing this shape, the Vesica Pisces, which is the womb of the world, back to Mother Mary, of course a mother energy. It would be coming through the Sheilas at certain times, I think, because that's part of the Sheila symbology. But recognising the Sacred Heart and that link with like ley lines, and the fact that the garden can be a portal itself to the divine, and that underneath all those mundane tasks there is a link to something bigger, to something divine. Ley lines, Mother Mary, water, temperance, it was all in there. And it's really helped me in this week, where I did start the week feeling incredibly overwhelmed and swamped. So much for my no-buy year and a year of slow living, with my word of the year last year, which was slow living freedom. That all seemed to have gone away, and a pace and a rush had come back in. I'd been buying things, I'd been thrifting, stuff was accumulating again, things were speeding up, and it was making me feel the need for temperance, the need for balance. Now, I'm actually in a temperance year, and I'm a Sagittarius, which is temperance is my card. So I'm not surprised that there has been that big pull for temperance. So the room and the house is decluttered again. I am pulling a halt on purchasing at the moment, and I'm just really savouring those mundane step at a time tasks to slow things down. I think mindfulness is a big part of this week's video as well. Herb Crafter's Tarot. This tarot, I think that the cards for this week's major arcana are really apt. So we've got Camellia for temperance, and that idea of mindfulness, of making tea. This is a tea plant, and you can see that there's a pot of tea out and the tea leaves, 3 cups of green tea there as well. And the book talks about being mindful, really savouring each task at a time. That is exactly the message that I was getting in the garden. The fact that there is something really divinely profound about savouring each of those little mundane tasks. The devil is blackberry. Now, I have blackberry in my front garden, and of course I've left brambles at the top of the garden, which you would have seen last week in last week's Garden Arcana, to get blackberries. I absolutely adore this book by Corinne Boyer, Under the Bramble Arch, where she speaks about the blackberry, and I just want to read you the way that she writes about the blackberry. She says, Lady Blackberry of the wild edges brings a power dark and defensive to the rustic practitioner. Her magics are shadowed in the between places, the disturbed grounds, the uncanny edges of the land. Blackberry briars form thorny tunnels, the purple-tinged sharp canes protecting hidden creatures and sheltering many birds. This plant is not ruled by humans. It exists onto its own, forming ill-omened thickets of food and medicine, as well as arches for those seeking to perform various folk rites under its shade. I just love the way she writes about plants. Of course, brambles are time limited. It's from October, I think. In here it says September the 29th. From September the 29th, it's believed that if you eat blackberries or pick them after that date, then they are possessed by the devil and they become poisonous. Now, Corinne Boyer says this of that belief. One belief tells that the devil placed his cloven hoof on the blackberries after September the 29th, and that it was he who coloured the berries black. From Scotland, a belief told that the devil covered the brambles with his cloak after this time. The devil was known to spit on them or even possess the berries after these particular dates. Some lore tells after November the 1st. It was believed that blackberries become poisonous in October. To stop harvesting became like an offering to the devil, so that he may have his share. Blackberries were called devil's grapes from the Balkans, as folklore tells that he tried to grow grapes and ended up with the thorny blackberry instead. The belief that the devil was connected to blackberries comes from a story about how when he was expelled from heaven, he fell into a blackberry patch on his way to hell. So you can see the blackberry just has to be mentioned for the devil. The death card in the Herb Crafters. I think this is my favourite card in the Herb Crafters. Of course, I showed you that area in the garden that is dedicated to the idea of the Day of the Dead, right next to my ancestor altar. It's also a celebration of Frida Kahlo and my love of her life and her art, and Frida as an icon. But of course, the marigold is all tied up in that symbology. And I have tried to plant marigolds around that area, and marigolds, ironically for me, are some of the hardest plants for me to grow. They die all the time. What great symbology that is. Currently at the moment, all the marigolds that I planted in the lower beds, I think the dogs ate them. I do have some that are still alive in the basket, and some opposite that area in a plant pot as well. Every year I try and grow marigolds. Every year I lose most of them. So the marigold as death, just perfect as well for Garden Arcana. I also want to look at this tarot deck, Tarot for All Ages, which is one that I very nearly got rid of. I very nearly gave up on this because I didn't think I liked it when I first got it. These are the backs on it there, but I've kind of come to love it actually, and I wanted to show you the death card in this deck because this is called Rebirth, and it really fits in with those butterflies that I showed around the Frida Kahlo Day of the Dead area. The butterflies were given to me by a friend who was throwing them out, again completely free and thrifted, but I just put them there because that idea of rebirth with death as well was all part of it. So that area of my garden, this card really does pull that all together. I love the Temperance card in this deck, which is called Balance. And that's where I've been trying to get to on the healing journey. So you've got this idea of a tightrope walker and then balancing the juggling balls in the air. I love the fact that there's the sun and the moon. Again, that links into the way my garden beds are organised in the garden, in the area that I picked. So that kind of ties in as well. And then finally, the Devil card in this deck has been changed to greed, and that idea of clinging on, a bit like the vines in the woodland that I saw. And finally, let's have a look at the Forest of Enchantment Tarot. This deck, oh gosh, it's so beautiful. All the cards are an absolute winner. So for Temperance, they have the fire element for Temperance. Of course, Sagittarius is fire sign, so I think it really does bring in the different elements here. The idea of fire and air needed to keep the fire going, then plunging the blacksmithing work into water. It's talking about an alchemy of the elements, which again is such a fantastic link to the garden, because in the garden you're bringing all those elements together: earth, air, fire, water, warmth from the sun as fire. You've got death as the black shock in here, not something you'd want to see in the woods. And of course the devil is the liar, but it really does make me think of the woods, how they are at the moment. They are very mysterious and covered in tree cover, just like these woods here. And you can even see the staff he's holding has got that twisty vine around it, ready to suffocate you. So I loved those depictions in tarot. So that's it for episode 5 of Garden Arcana. I cannot wait to see what everybody else comes up with and what Theia comes up with over at Garden Goddess Tarot. There is a playlist now. I'm linking everything to the playlist. Thank you guys so much for watching. There will be room makeover videos coming soon, I'm sure, because I want to repaint and redecorate now in here, as well as finish decluttering. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.